know what we're going to do today.
Hello, and welcome to the Flores Garden. We are back with the Heroes of Olympus series, Poseidon. I know you guys missed it because I really did. Percy is confused. When he awoke from his long sleep, he didn't know much more than his name. His brain fuzz is lingering, even after the wolf Lupa told him he is a demigod and trained him to fight with the pen/sword in his pocket. Somehow Percy manages to make it to a camp for half-bloods, despite the fact that he has to keep killing monsters along the way. But the camp doesn't ring any bells with him. The only thing he can recall from his past is another name. Annabeth. Hazel is supposed to be dead. When she lived before, she didn't do a very good job of it. Sure, she was an obedient daughter, even when her mother was possessed by greed. But that was the problem. When the voice took over her mother and commanded Hazel to use her gift for an evil purpose, Hazel couldn't say no. Now, because of her mistake, the future of the world is at risk. Hazel wishes she could ride away from it all on the stallion that appears in her dreams. Frank is a klutz. His grandmother says he is descended from heroes and can be anything he wants to be, but he doesn't see it. He doesn't even know who his father is. He keeps hoping Apollo will claim him because the only thing he is good at is archery, although not good enough to win camp war games. His bulky physique makes him feel like an ox, especially in front of Hazel, his closest friend at camp. He trusts her completely, enough to share the secret he holds close to his heart. Beginning at the other camp for half-bloods and extending as far as the land beyond the gods, this breathtaking second installment in the Heroes of Olympus series introduces new demigods, revives fearsome monsters, and features other remarkable creatures, all destined to play a part in the Prophecy of Seven. So just like with the previous book, as well as the Kane Chronicles, there is a glossary in the back explaining all of the different gods. And in the beginning of the book, there is a map of Camp Jupiter, which is situated in California rather than New York. The book is told in third-person point of view, just like the previous Heroes of Olympus book. It is between Percy, Hazel, and Frank, like I mentioned in the synopsis. Each character has 4 chapters each, so it's 4 Percy, 4 Hazel, 4 Frank, and then the pattern repeats up until the very end. The book starts off with Percy being chased by the Gorgons for 3 days. So if you don't remember the Gorgons, the most popular one is Medusa, and then her 2 sisters, Stheno and Uriel. Except Medusa isn't in this story. Remember, she was killed back in the first Percy Jackson book by Percy himself, so Percy's really just being chased by her sisters. Every time Percy kills Uriel and Stheno, they come back to life a few hours later. Okay, they're not staying dead, unfortunately. The Gorgons can't kill him for whatever reason. They can't even harm him. Percy still has the Curse of Achilles. If you don't remember what that is, it was mentioned in the last Olympian, so he basically still has his Superman power, where nothing can harm him. You can poke him with a stick and it won't even faze him. A few months ago, Percy woke up in a wolf house with absolutely no memory other than his own name and the name Annabeth, and the fact that he's the son of a sea god. Okay, just the fact that he remembers Annabeth's name just had me like squealing really bad. Oh, my heart.
I'm feeling.
The Gorgons catch up to Percy again. Again, this has been going on for 3 days. And they mention that they work for Gaia. I'm going to say Gaia. I might even switch off to Gaia every once in a while. I have heard both pronunciations, so I don't really know which one is correct. Gaia's armies are marching south. She'll awaken at the Feast of Fortune, and the demigods will die. Once again, Percy kills Uriel and Stheno, but like I said, they don't stay dead. Percy starts running before the Gorgons can come back to life. and he finds the entrance to a demigod camp being guarded by 2 Roman sentries. On his way to the entrance, Percy meets a lady named June, and it sounds very close to Juno, who is a Roman goddess. June tells Percy that he has 2 choices. He can run past the camp and make it to the beach somewhere in the Bay Area in San Francisco and let the Gorgons attack June, or he can save June by carrying her into the camp. A brief interjection. The current timeline has not been mentioned yet. If it's late December, like in The Lost Hero, how in the name of Zeus did Percy miss Jason, like, on his way to Camp Jupiter? Percy looked at the old lady, and I'd carry you to this camp because it's a kindness, she said, and if you don't, the gods will die. The world we know will perish, and everyone from your old life will be destroyed. Of course, you wouldn't remember them, so I suppose it won't matter. You'd be safe at the bottom of the sea. If I go to the camp, he said, will I get my memory back? Eventually, June said, but be warned, you will sacrifice much. You'll lose the mark of Achilles. You'll feel pain, misery, and loss beyond anything you've ever known. But you might have a chance to save your old friends and family, to reclaim your old life. And honestly, it's the thought of Annabeth that gets him to choose to help June.
I'm feeling.
Percy makes it to the camp entrance with June. The guards, Frank and Hazel, let him and June through while they take on the Gorgons. Yeah, they came back to life like pretty much immediately, somewhere while he was talking to June. So that was kind of a waste of time, but whatever. One last obstacle Percy had to face. He had to cross the little Tiber or Tiber? I'm going to say Tiber. The little Tiber River to reach Camp Jupiter. If he crosses the river, he loses the curse of Achilles. Yeah, unfortunately, we can't have any Greek blessings in a Roman camp. Percy crosses the river, then uses his water powers to help Frank and Hazel kill the Gorgons. Again. Honestly, another 4 books of Percy will not be as exciting if he still has his Superman powers. And, like, that's probably why I never liked Superman in the first place, because he was, like, indestructible unless you had kryptonite. June, it turns out, is really Juno. Her Greek name, Hera. She addresses Camp Jupiter. Romans, I present to you the son of Neptune. For months he has been slumbering, but now he is awake. His fate is in your hands. The feast of fortune comes quickly, and death must be unleashed if you are to stand any hope in the battle. Do not fail me. One girl, Raina, recognizes Percy, but lies and says she doesn't know him. Yeah, never a good sign when somebody recognizes you and, like, doesn't mention it. Hazel, said Raina, bring him inside. I want to question him at the Principia. Then we'll send him to Octavian. We must consult the auguries before we decide what to do with him. Before we accept anyone into camp, we must interrogate them and read the auguries. Juno said your fate is in our hands. We have to know whether the goddess has brought us a new recruit, or if she's brought us an enemy to kill. So Raina is the daughter of Bellona. Her Greek name is Enyo, goddess of war. Camp Jupiter has a bunch of ghosts running around, or floating around, whichever. The ghosts are called Lares. They are ancestral spirits.
Now, wake up the ancestors. One family reunion coming right up. Okay, people look alive. Let's go. Come on, get up. Let's move it. Rise and shine. You're all way past the beauty sleep thing. Trust me.
And the word principia that Raina mentioned earlier is Latin, meaning principles the truth, not principal as in, the person in charge of a school. I would also like to remind you my Latin is better than my Greek. Percy is at the Principia with Hazel and Reina. Reina has two dogs, Argentum and Aurum, which are two Latin words meaning silver and gold. This is not important to the plot, but you'd be surprised at how often you come across Latin words and terms in real life. So it's good to keep that info in your brain. Like, I can guarantee you that if you read these and then you take chemistry later, you will find those two exact words on the chemistry table. Percy tells Reina everything that he does know. Percy told his story, how he'd woken up at the ruined mansion in the woods of Sonoma. He described his time with Lupa and her pack, learning their language of gestures and expressions, learning to survive and fight. Lupa had taught him about demigods, monsters, and gods. She'd explained that she was one of the guardian spirits of ancient Rome. Demigods like Percy were still responsible for carrying on Roman traditions in modern times, fighting monsters, serving the gods, protecting mortals, and upholding the memory of the empire. She'd spent weeks training him until he was as strong and tough and vicious as a wolf. When she was satisfied with his skills, she'd sent him south, telling him that if he survived the journey, he might find a new home and regain his memory. So, confirmation on the timeline, it is currently June. Juno. Ha ha ha. Almost a year since the events of The Last Olympian, and 6 months after The Lost Hero. Hazel asked if Percy ran into someone named Jason. Reina then explains about Jason. He was my colleague. The Legion normally has 2 elected praetors. Jason Grace, son of Jupiter, was our other praetor until he disappeared last October. Elections only happen in 2 ways, Reina said. Either the Legion raises someone on a shield after a major success on the battlefield, and we haven't had any major battles, or we hold a ballot on the evening of June 24th at the Feast of Fortuna. That's in 5 days. Fortuna, the goddess of luck. Whatever happens on her feast day can affect the entire rest of the year. She can grant the camp good luck or really bad luck. That means Percy has less than 1 week to save Camp Jupiter from Gaia. Hazel is taking Percy to go see Octavian, a descendant of Apollo. Octavian is not one of Apollo's kids. Thank Apollo, because he's a little weasel. Not even in a good way. Camp Jupiter has demigod campers, children of the gods, or descendants of demigods. The children, grandchildren, or great-grandchildren of demigods. So it's like a whole generational thing, which also makes me wonder, like, how far can bloodlines go before god powers are, like, non-existent in the bloodline? We get a description of how Camp Jupiter is run. It's very precise, very organized, and very mathematical. I'm not gonna lie, I got really bored reading that part. I'll stick with the Greek camp. Thanks. As they walked, Percy noticed a diamond at Hazel's feet. She picks it up before anyone else can touch it. Octavian, little slime ball, can read the future from the stuffing of stuffed animals. You better stay away from my stuffed animals. Okay? If anything happens to my Simba collection, Octavian's gonna get it. Camp Jupiter doesn't have an oracle like Camp Half-Blood does, but they have seraps. Wow. Okay, I cannot read my handwriting. Camp Jupiter doesn't have an oracle like Camp Half-Blood does, but they have scraps of the Sibylline books, which are books of prophecy. So according to mythology, Sibylline comes from an oracle named Sibyl. So Sibylline, Sibyl. It'd be like if the books are named Cassandra. Cassandra, the prophetess of doom. my favorite Greek story, but I am being entirely biased here. The Sibylline books were supposedly destroyed when Rome fell, and that was like forever ago, back when dinosaurs roamed the earth. Kidding, wasn't that long ago. It was a long time ago, just not when dinosaurs were around. Octavian wants to replace Jason as praetor and is subtly blackmailing Hazel for her vote. Seriously, Octavian is like a major scumbag. He says he knows her secret, but won't say what her secret is. Hazel then takes Percy to meet her brother, Nico D'Angelo. My Nico! Time for Hazel. Yes, I know that she's a daughter of Pluto and not Hades, but it's my channel. I'm gonna wear Hades because I can. Deal with it. Also, I have diamonds. Can't really see them. There we go. I've got diamonds. My baby Nico is acting like he doesn't know Percy. Okay, Nico, baby, what you doing? And Hazel can tell that Nico is lying about not knowing Percy. Percy says he feels like he knows Nico. Seriously, baby, what are you doing? Long ago, Hazel had been told that a descendant of Neptune would save her. But could Percy really take away her curse? A quote directly from the book. Again, with the vague curses. It's like with the Kane Chronicles, where we kept hearing about the curse of King Tut, but we don't actually know what it is until much, much later. Nico gave Percy a recap of what happened during the last Olympian, using the gods' Roman names, and leaving out the fact that Percy was involved. Again, Nico, baby, what are you doing? Like, honestly, I am so not complaining because Nico is my favorite character in the entire series. But what is he doing in a Roman camp? How did he even find it? Like, I want a full book explaining how Nico came across the Romans. Also because, it's more Nico. I would love it. Hazel, it turns out, has a crush on Frank. Aww. But sometimes still thinks about her ex-boyfriend, Sammy. I mean, once we get into that part of the story, I'm using the word ex-boyfriend kind of loosely. Also, it doesn't sound important at the moment, but it is. Frank comes over and asks Percy if he can stay. Since Octavian said yes, Frank has to help Percy get cleaned up. I mean, I know Percy's been on the run for like several days, but you think he'd be a little bit cleaner considering he's the son of Poseidon. Now that Frank took Percy away, Hazel and Nico are having a little brother-sister conversation. She asks if he knows Percy, and Nico doesn't say yes outright, but he tells her that Percy is important and dangerous to his enemies. Nico says that he can't say any more than that. He can't interfere with what's going on involving Percy. Nico then explains that things in the underworld are bad. Their dad, Hades, is losing control of the dead. No one is staying dead. Also a reminder that Nico, being the son of Hades, has power over the dead. Hazel, daughter of Pluto, which is the Roman aspect of Hades, does not. She has power over jewels. She has power over diamonds. Oh, dropped my diamond. Don't worry, it's fake. Hades' Roman aspect Pluto isn't just Lord of the Dead, he's also the Lord of Riches, which is pretty cool. I mean, come on. Hazel suddenly has a flashback of her 13th birthday, which took place in 1941. I'm going to repeat that. 1941. Before we jump into the flashback, I did a little bit of research. Nico's birthday is January 28th, a month after mine, 1924, which means that as of right now in the year 2024, he is 100 years old. Hazel's birthday, which is December 17th, 11 days before mine, 1928. Therefore, Nico is older than her by 4 years, but seeing as how both of them came from the past, their ages are like super close and also not. It's like too much to just don't think about it, okay? I overthought about it and it gave me a major headache, just like when I'm watching Outlander with my mom and I'm trying to figure out who's older, Jamie or Claire, even though Claire's older by 5 years, but Jamie was born in the past, which then makes him older. And I'm going off on a tangent, so I'm just gonna stop. And it also made me curious, like how many of Hades' children besides Nico and Hazel were misplaced from World War II era? I'm pretty sure that he probably had more besides Nico, Hazel, and Bianca. Plus, we do need more children of Hades/Pluto. I mean, come on. Hazel was from New Orleans, Louisiana, which had me thinking for a brief moment, did she ever encounter Anubis from the Kane Chronicles? Because one of his favorite places is the cemetery in New Orleans. I mean, come on, just think of like a cute little story where they meet somewhere and just like kind of hang out because he can sense that she's a child of Pluto. Come on, they'd be friends. It'd be cute. Back to the heroes of Olympus because I keep going off on tangents here. So back to Hazel's flashback. No one liked her because she was cursed and everyone thought her mom was a witch. Hazel's curse, gold, silver, and jewels would crop up around her. Her mother was a Gris woman. Actually, I don't think I pronounced that right. The French in Louisiana is slightly different from the French that I study, so my pronunciation is most likely off. Sorry. Her mother was a Gris woman that would either sell the jewels or use them to pay for things they needed, like food or rent. People that had the gold, silver, and jewels either had really bad accidents or died. I've got 8 diamonds in my hand right now. I know you can't see it because of the lighting, but since I have 8 diamonds in my hand, what's gonna happen? Hazel's ex-boyfriend Sammy was the only person to like Hazel. Again, I am using the term ex-boyfriend extremely loosely. Pluto then showed up saying now that Hazel was 13, he had to take her somewhere safe to protect her. Hazel's mom hates Pluto for Hazel's curse and tells him to leave. Hazel's mom says that they are going to move away from New Orleans. So flashback is over and we end up learning that Hazel had actually died and now she's back from the dead. Zombie! Just kidding, she's not a zombie. During dinner, Percy keeps wanting to talk to Nico because he insists he knows Nico from somewhere. And Nico keeps avoiding the conversation. Baby, why? Frank and Hazel explain to Percy about an eagle. It's the symbol of the whole camp, a big eagle made of gold. It's supposed to protect us in battle and make our enemies afraid. Each legion's eagle gave it all sorts of power, and ours came from Jupiter himself. Supposedly, Julius Caesar nicknamed our legion Fulminata, armed with lightning, because of what the eagle can do. Each legion guarded theirs to the last man, because it was charged with power from the gods. They'd rather hide it or melt it down than surrender it to an enemy. There was this huge expedition to Alaska back in the 80s. That prophecy you noticed in the temple, the one about the 7 demigods and the doors of death, our senior praetor at the time was Michael Varus from the 5th cohort. Back then, the 5th was the best in camp. He thought it would bring glory to the legion if he could figure out the prophecy and make it come true. Save the world from storm and fire and all that. He talked to the augur, and the augur said the answer was in Alaska, but he warned Michael it wasn't time yet. The prophecy wasn't for him. But he went anyway. Long gruesome story. Almost the entire fifth cohort was wiped out. Most of Legion's Imperial gold weapons were lost, along with the Eagle. The survivors went crazy or refused to talk about what had attacked them. Since the Eagle was lost, the camp has been getting weaker. Quests are more dangerous. Monsters attack the borders more often. Morale is lower. The last month or so, things have been getting much worse, much faster. So the golden eagle they were talking about, right here on the cover with Percy. It is time for the war god himself, Mars. So for this book, we got like a lot of background information about the two new characters, Hazel and Frank. We've got Frank's backstory up next. Frank's life is tied to a piece of firewood. Once it's burned up, Frank will die, and it's a curse. So my first thought was like, why? Why are we picking on this big, lovable cutie pie? Like, what did Frank ever do? His grandmother said that Juno had chosen Frank's path years ago. And you know what? It always comes back to Juno or Hera in these books. I mean, I don't think that she's actually a bad character considering her history in actual Greek mythology, but I think she gets a pretty bad rap in the Percy Jackson books. And my next question was, how did Frank's granny know about the gods? Like, only their human parent knew about the gods, so how did Frank's grandmother know? So Frank's last name is Zhang, which means master of the bows. And Frank is really good at archery. So which two gods are the best at archery? The twins, Apollo and Artemis. So we already know that Frank's mom is human. So our first thought would be like, oh, so he's probably a son of Apollo because of the archery part. But nope, 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 nope. Mm-mm. And he's really hoping that his dad is Apollo. And I'm like, why not? Apollo's pretty cool. And unfortunately, Frank has not been claimed yet. He's still godly parentless. And it occurred to me while I was reading this that for whatever reason, Apollo doesn't have a Roman name. So he's Apollo in both the Greek version and the Roman version. So Vitellius, I believe that's how you pronounce his name, one of the Larrys, knows about Frank's curse. And Frank keeps this a secret. Like, come on, your major weakness is a piece of firewood. You're not gonna really like blurt that out to anybody, are you? Vitellius says it's the curse of the Argonauts. So the book mentions that Frank is both Greek and Roman. He's actually the only character that has both Greek and Roman blood running through his veins. Vitellius also knows that Frank took vials of Gorgon's blood that had been with Percy. So information about the Gorgon's blood, the blood taken from the right side of a Gorgon's body can cure any disease, even bring the dead back to life. But blood taken from the left side of a Gorgon is instantly fatal. And that's information that's going to be super important later, I promise. Like, it wasn't just thrown in there. Vitellius insists that Frank is going to need the vials of Gorgon's blood for his quest, but Frank hasn't been given a quest yet. Raina sent Frank to get Percy from Hazel. Also, little side note, Frank has a crush on Hazel, which is like really cute, and honestly, they are really cute together when we like read about them in the books. Like, aww, Frank is a giant teddy bear. It is semi-important for later, but it's more for like relationship drama. Frank then explains the Greek versus Roman concept to the gods, which is also like all of that information was also mentioned in The Lost Hero, and there's also a bit more information included in that. Some people say Greek influence is still around, like it's still a part of the gods' personalities. And back in the ancient days, when Rome fell, the eastern half of the empire survived, the Greek half. It was called the Byzantium. The Eastern Empire lasted another 1,000 years, but it was always more Greek than Roman. That's why whatever country we settle in, Camp Jupiter is always in the west, the Roman part of the territory. The east is considered bad luck. So Camp Jupiter is on the west side of the United States, and Camp Half-Blood, the Greeks, are on the east side of the United States. We get a bit of a flashback of Frank's past. After his mom died, his grandmother explains the family history, which is important for his backstory, and it also explains why he's half Greek, half Roman. Grandmother is explaining, I know of prophecies and gods, Greek, Roman, Chinese. They intertwine in our family. I did not question what she told me about your father. Your father was a god. He fell in love with your mother because she was a natural warrior. It is no surprise a god would fall in love with her given our family. He must have known she was of ancient blood. China and Rome are not so different, nor as separate as you might believe. Our family is from Gansu province, a town once called Lijian. And before that, as I said, ancient blood, the blood of princes and heroes. I would also like to add an apology here. I am not very good with Mandarin. Shortly after you were born, a visitor appeared at our hearth. A woman appeared at the fire, dressed in blue silk, with a strange cloak like the skin of a goat. The woman with the goat skin was a goddess. I can always tell these things. And she told your mother, he will close the circle. He will return your family to its roots and bring you great honor. I do not argue with goddesses. He will go to camp and restore your reputation there. He will free Thanatos from his icy chains. Thanatos is the Greek name for death, completely different from Hades. Like, they work within the same area, they just have different-ish jobs. The blood of Pylos is strong in this child from his mother's side. He will have the Zhang family gift, but he will also have the powers of his father. No power comes without a price. Before the goddess disappeared, she pointed at the fire and said, he will be the strongest of your clan and the greatest. But the fates have decreed he will also be the most vulnerable. His life will burn bright and short. As soon as that piece of tinder is consumed, that stick at the edge of the fire, your son is destined to die. Roman, Chinese, the destinies of men can often be predicted and sometimes guarded against, at least for a time. The firewood is in your possession now. Keep it close. As long as it is safe, you are safe. Apparently, Frank's great-grandfather, Shen Lun, was at Camp Jupiter at one point, and whatever Shen Lun did, it was bad, and Frank must never mention he's related to him. You know, family honor and dishonor and stuff like that. So we're brought back to the present. The kids are doing war games, which is pretty similar to Capture the Flag at Camp Half-Blood, but with forts. Frank, Hazel, and Percy are using tunnels underground to sneak up on their opponents. Hazel has an excellent sense of direction underground. Most likely has to do with her being the daughter of Pluto. Frank, Hazel, and Percy made it into enemy territory and battled their opponents, and Percy is just being amazing overall because he's Percy. He fought like a demon, rolling through the defenders' ranks in a completely unorthodox style, rolling under their feet, slashing with his sword instead of stabbing like a Roman would, whacking campers with the flat of his blade, and generally causing mass panic. He somersaulted over a line of shields and slammed the butt of his sword into Octavian's helmet. Wait, you're telling me Percy's not Roman? The trio ended up getting their enemy's flag, and they won the game because, of course, they did. It's Percy. So while everybody is like celebrating the end of the game, a girl named Gwen ended up dying. She had been stabbed and nobody noticed, so she was technically dead. Like, she was murdered. It wasn't even an accident. Frank suspects that it might have been Octavian, and honestly, I would put the quarter I found at work today on that bet, because that's all I'm willing to bet. It was never denied nor confirmed who actually murdered Gwen. Octavian just gives off like that sleazy vibe, like it's not somebody that you would turn your back on.
Don't turn your back on me, Scar.
Oh no, Mufasa. Perhaps you shouldn't turn your back on me.
So while everyone's like freaking out that Gwen was murdered, she suddenly alive again. Like, she just shoots up, eyes open, and people are looking at her like, you have a weapon coming straight out of your body and you're moving. Okay. Zombie! So Gwen had been hit with a 7-foot long harpoon. Again, she was dead. And when they got it out, her wound healed, she's fine, she's alive. I'm still saying zombie because, like, no. It's not natural. Gwen said, there was a river and a man asking for a coin. I turned around and the exit door was open, so I just left. So remember what I said during the Lost Hero, that the doors of death were open? Gwen had made it to Charon's boat. You know, she was supposed to cross the river into the underworld, but she didn't because she turned around and saw that the doors of death were open, so she just left. She was dead, and she decided to, like, come back to life. I would also like to remind you that Jason had technically died at the end of The Lost Hero, and he came back. So this was more proof that the doors of death are open. 2 characters who should have been dead are now alive. Still alive. So while everyone's still freaking out about Gwen, a thunderous voice says, death loses its hold. This is only the beginning. Because that's not ominous at all. A god appears. Take a wild guess who? And Percy automatically called him Ares. Percy, we're not allowed to use Greek names here. God says Ares is his Greek name. His Roman name is Mars. Jupiter / Zeus is still enforcing the no contact rule with demigods, but he's allowing Mars a few minutes to speak to everyone at Camp Jupiter. Thanatos has been chained. The doors of death have been forced open and no one is policing them, at least not impartially. Gaia allows her enemies to pour forth into the world of mortals. Her sons, the giants, are mustering armies against you, armies that you will not be able to kill. Unless death is unleashed to return to his duties, you will be overrun. You must find Thanatos and free him from the giants. Only he can reverse the tide. The barriers between life and death will continue to weaken. Those who know how to take advantage of this will exploit it. Monsters are already harder to dispatch. Soon they will be completely impossible to kill. Some demigods will also be able to find their way back from the underworld. Jason and Gwen. If left unchecked, even mortals will eventually find it impossible to die. Can you imagine a world in which no one dies? Ever? Okay, honestly, that would be a bit horrifying. I order a quest. You will go north and find Thanatos in the land beyond the gods. You will free him and thwart the plans of the giants. Beware Gaia. Beware her son, the eldest giant. Everyone here remembers the land where the Legion lost its honor. Perhaps if the quest succeeds and you return by the Feast of Fortuna, perhaps then your honor will be restored. If you don't succeed, there won't be any camp left to return to. Rome will be overrun, its legacy lost forever. So my advice is, don't fail. He's always a rather charming character. Since Mars ordered the quest, there's no prophecy to go along with it, and this is actually quite possibly the only book that doesn't have a prophecy. No, wait. The House of Hades did not have a prophecy. That's correct. Yep. Quest needs to be completed by June 24th. And before he leaves, he decides that he's going to claim Frank as his son. Yay! He even gave Frank a spear with a dragon tooth at the end of it. And he says to Frank, you haven't learned to use your mom's talents yet, have you? Well, that spear will give you some breathing room until you do. You get 3 charges out of it, so use it wisely. Okay, what talents? We always get such vague comments from the gods. Also, what does the spear do? Like, couldn't have given us some instructions or something? So instead of voting on who's going on the quest, Mars automatically says, Frank's going because he's my son. Also, Percy's going because he needs to learn to respect me. And then Frank can choose whoever. So guess who he chooses? Hazel! Percy is dreaming about Grover. They still have that empathy link, which was mentioned the first time back in the Sea of Monsters. Percy doesn't recognize Grover, of course. Sadness, considering they're best friends. Grover says they're trying to find Percy. Tyson is the closest on trying to lock onto Percy's location. The dream shifts to Annabeth. She said they've been searching for him for months. He needs to stay where he is so that they can find him. And then the dream keeps shifting after that. The image is accelerated. He saw a huge ship in a dry dock, workers scrambling to finish the hull, a guy with the blowtorch welding a bronze dragon figurehead to the prow. He saw the war god stalking toward him in the surf, a sword in his hands. The scene shifted. Percy stood on the field of Mars, looking up at the Berkeley Hills. Golden grass rippled, and a face appeared in the landscape. A sleeping woman, her features formed from shadows and folds in the terrain. Her eyes remained closed, but her voice spoke in Percy's mind. So this is the demigod who destroyed my son Kronos. You don't look like much, Percy Jackson, but you're valuable to me. Come north. Meet Alcyoneus. Juno can play her little games with Greeks and Romans, but in the end, you will be my pawn. You will be the key to the gods' defeat. Percy's vision turned dark. He stood in a theater-sized version of the camp's headquarters, a principia with walls of ice and freezing mist hanging in the air. The floor was littered with skeletons in Roman armor and imperial gold weapons encrusted with frost. In the back of the room sat an enormous shadowy figure. His skin glinted of gold and silver as if he were an automaton like Reyna's dogs. Behind him stood a collection of ruined emblems, tattered banners, and a large golden eagle on a staff of iron. The giant's voice boomed in the vast chamber. This will be fun, son of Neptune. It's been eons since I broke a demigod of your caliber. I await you atop the ice. Percy woke, shivering. Since Percy, Frank, and Hazel are going on a quest, there needs to be a Senate meeting first. Like, the Romans have a lot of protocols and rules they need to follow before doing anything, and it got really annoying for me. Percy's worried that the Senate meeting will go badly like it did for Julius Caesar.
We should totally just stab Caesar!
The Senate meeting so far is just discussing the quest. Again, like, pretty boring. Percy, Frank, and Hazel need to go to the land beyond the gods, which happens to be Alaska. Alaska is cursed. They call it the land beyond the gods for a reason. It's so far north, the Roman gods have no power there. The place is swarming with monsters. No demigod has come back from there alive since we lost our eagle. The 5th cohort led that expedition. We failed, and we have to be responsible for making things right. That's why Mars is sending us. This giant, the son of Gaia, he's the one who defeated our forces 30 years ago. I'm sure of it. Now he's sitting up there in Alaska with the chained death god and all our old equipment. He's mustering his armies and sending them south to attack this camp. We'll get back our eagle and unchain this god, Thanatos. So Thanatos is the Greek name. The Roman name is Letus. The giant they must face is Alcyoneus. Again, I am doing my best with Greek pronunciations. I am so sorry. Each giant was bred specifically to oppose one of the 12 Olympian gods, to usurp that god's domain. The king of giants was Porphyrion, the anti-Jupiter. But the eldest giant was Alcyoneus. He was born to oppose Pluto. Just a reminder that giants can only be defeated by gods and demigods working together. Alcyoneus was completely immortal, impossible to kill by god or demigod, as long as he remained in his home territory, the place where he was born. And if Alcyoneus has been reborn in Alaska, then he can't be defeated there, ever, by any means, which is why our 1980s expedition was doomed to fail. So there is a difference between Pluto/Hades and Thanatos. Pluto, or Hades, is the god of the underworld, but the actual god of death, the one who's responsible for making sure souls go to the afterlife and stay there, that's Pluto's, or Hades, lieutenant, Thanatos. Thanatos catches the souls and deports them back to the underworld. My favorite parts, and I'm saying parts as in multiple, of this entire series are all of the Nico scenes, because Nico is super prominent in this series and it just makes me like fangirl so bad. The other ghosts grumbled. Nico put his finger to his lips. Suddenly all the Lares went silent. Some looked alarmed, like their mouths had been glued together. I love Nico so much. He is like the coolest character in this universe. Nico is now explaining about the doors of death. The doors of death. There are many ways into the underworld. The river Styx, the door of Orpheus, plus smaller escape routes that open up from time to time. With Thanatos imprisoned, all those exits will be easier to use. Sometimes it might work to our advantage and let a friendly soul come back. More often, it will benefit evil souls and monsters, the sneaky ones who are looking to escape. Now the doors of death, those are the personal doors of Thanatos, his fast lane between life and death. Only Thanatos is supposed to know where they are, and the location shifts over the ages. The doors of death have been forced open. Gaia's minions have seized control of them. I mean, it makes sense that Nico would know all of this because he is the son of Hades, which means Gaia controls who can come back from the dead. She can pick and choose who to let out, the worst monsters, the most evil souls. If we rescue Thanatos, that means at least he can catch souls again and send them below. Monsters will die when we kill them like they used to, and we'll get a little breathing room. But unless we're able to retake the doors of death, our enemies won't stay down for long. They'll have an easy way back to the world of the living. Thanatos knows where the doors are. If we free him, he can retake them, but not alone. He's no match for Gaia. That would take a massive quest, an army of the best demigods. Foes bear arms to the doors of death. That's the prophecy of 7. If this begins the ancient prophecy, we don't have resources to send an army to these doors of death and protect the camp. First, we have to free Thanatos. Mars told us we only need 3 people for the quest to Alaska. Let's concentrate on succeeding with that and getting back before the Feast of Fortuna. Then we can worry about the doors of death. Octavian is suggesting that Percy, Frank, and Hazel shouldn't get any help from Camp Jupiter for their quest. Again, major slime ball. I just want to smack him with my stuffed animals. Percy says they just need a boat to get to Alaska. That's all the assistance Camp Jupiter will provide. Raina needs to talk to Percy alone. She admits to meeting Percy years ago at a spa he and Annabeth destroyed. A spa 4 years ago was when they encountered Circe in the Sea of Monsters. I actually had to go back and reread that entire scene in the Sea of Monsters. The only people that Percy mentioned and interacted with were Circe and Hyla. Hyla happened to be Raina's older sister. And he also mentions 2 unnamed attendants. So it is quite possible that one of those 2 unnamed attendants was actually Raina. Raina then changed the subject to Jason. I think you were sent here to make up for the loss of Jason. The way you talk about him, Percy said. Were you 2 a couple? We might have been, Raina said, given time. Praetors work closely together. It's common for them to become romantically involved. Eesh, that means it's going to be a love triangle between Raina, Jason, and Piper. But Jason was only Praetor for a few months before he disappeared. Ever since then, Octavian has been pestering me, agitating for new elections. I've resisted. I need a partner in power, but I prefer someone like Jason, a warrior, not a schemer. I believe the gods sent you to help me. I don't understand where you come from any more than I understood it 4 years ago, but I think your arrival is some sort of repayment. You destroyed my home once. Now you've been sent to save my home. I don't hold a grudge against you for the past, Percy. My sister hates you still, it's true, but fate brought me here to Camp Jupiter. I've done well. All I ask is that you work with me for the future. I intend to save this camp. I've seen what you can do. If you return successfully from this mission, the Legion might be saved. The praetorship will be yours for the taking. Together, you and I could expand the power of Rome. We could raise an army and find the doors of death, crush Gaia's forces once and for all. You would find me a very helpful friend. Okay, she's kind of hinting out at the fact that she and Percy could be a couple. And no, no, no. Percy is with Annabeth. Okay, that is my OTP. You do not mess with that. In 4 days, I have to make a choice. If we are to fight off an invasion, we must have 2 strong praetors. I prefer you, but if you fail on your quest or don't come back or refuse my offer, well, I'll work with Octavian. I mean to save this camp, Percy Jackson. Things are worse than you realize. Being work colleagues? Yes, fine, you can do that, but do not flirt with Percy. Reyna mentions the giant is on his way to Camp Jupiter with an army, and it's not Alcyonius. Lupa and her wolves are trying to slow them down, but the army is too strong. Lupa, if you recall, was mentioned in The Lost Hero. Reyna tells Percy to make a stop in Seattle on the way to Alaska. Find Hyla and show her Reyna's ring. Hyla might, a huge emphasis on might, help Percy instead of kill him for destroying Circe's spa. Percy, Frank, and Hazel leave for their quest after lunch. And honestly, at this point, I was like, finally. All of the Roman rules and regulations, it was driving me insane. For me, it was boring. Extremely confining. I felt confined and I was reading it. One of the rules mentioned in the book was no weapons inside the Senate, which is pretty obvious because the last time weapons were brought into the Senate, Julius Caesar was killed.
We should totally just stab Caesar!
But then there are other rules that just drove me completely insane. All of the regulations and procedures and making sure everything is exact. I can't do that. So the trio reaches Alameda Docks in San Francisco Bay, where a Camp Jupiter rowboat waited. It had no oars, but really Percy doesn't need oars to manage a boat. Juno was right, the sleepy voice of Gaia whispered in Percy's mind. You could have chosen a new life in the sea. You would have been safe from me there. Now it's too late. You chose pain and misery. You're part of my plan now. My important little pawn. Hazel is thinking about Nico. Before she left on the quest, Nico said he was going to help Hades try to regain order in the underworld and see if he can find and close the doors of death by himself. Nico, no, dangerous, but that information is important for later. Hazel has another flashback. So for a while, we're going to have quite a few flashbacks from Hazel. Hazel and her mom moved to Alaska. Even here, people are afraid of them. Just that aura of something is not right with them just kind of emanates and scares people. Hazel found a horse and tried catching it, but it moves faster than a normal horse. Hazel also thought she saw the horse eating a gold nugget she had accidentally summoned from the ground. A horse that eats gold. I mean, I know horses are expensive, but that's a bit too far. After Hazel got home from chasing the horse, pinned to the wall was a note in writing that was not her mother's. Wicked girl, I'm waiting at the island. Don't disappoint me. Hazel sobbed in despair. She wanted to ignore the summons. She wanted to run away, but there was nowhere to go. Besides, her mother was trapped. The voice had promised that they were almost done with their task. If Hazel kept helping, her mother would be freed. Hazel didn't trust the voice, but she didn't see any other option. At the center of the island, 2 massive black boulders formed the entrance to a tunnel. Hazel made her way into the cavern she called the heart of the earth. It was the only true warm place Hazel had found since moving to Alaska. The air smelled of freshly turned soil. The sweet, moist heat made Hazel feel drowsy, but she fought to stay awake. She imagined that if she fell asleep here, her body would sink into the earthen floor and turn to mulch. The cave was as large as a church sanctuary, like the St. Louis Cathedral back home on Jackson Square. The walls glowed with luminescent mosses, green, red, and purple. The whole chamber thrummed with energy, an echoing boom, 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 that reminded Hazel of a heartbeat. Perhaps it was just the sea's waves battering the island, but Hazel didn't think so. This place was alive. The earth was asleep, but it pulsated with power. Its dreams were so malicious, so fitful, that Hazel felt herself losing her grip on reality. Gaia wanted to consume her identity, just as she'd overwhelmed Hazel's mother. She wanted to consume every human, god, and demigod that dared to walk across her surface. "You'll all belong to me," Gaia murmured like a lullaby. "Surrender. Return to the earth." "No," Hazel thought. "I'm Hazel Levesque. You can't have me." Marie Levesque stood over the pit. "It's too late," her mother's frail voice echoed through the cavern. Hazel realized with a shock that it was her voice, not Gaia's. "Mother?" Marie turned. Her eyes were open. She was awake and conscious. This should have made Hazel feel relieved, but it made her nervous. The voice had never relinquished control while they were on the island. "What have I done?" her mother asked helplessly. "Oh, Hazel, what did I do to you?" She stared in horror at the thing in the pit. For months they had been coming here, 4 or 5 nights a week, as the voice required. Hazel had cried. She'd collapsed with exhaustion. She'd pleaded. She'd given in to despair. But the voice that controlled her mother had urged her on relentlessly. "Bring valuables from the earth. Use your powers, child. Bring my most valuable possession to me." At first her efforts had brought only scorn. The fissure in the earth had filled with gold and precious stones, bubbling in a thick soup of petroleum. It looked like a dragon's treasure dump in a tar pit. Then, slowly, a rock spire began to grow, like a massive tulip bulb. It emerged so gradually, night after night, that Hazel had trouble judging its progress. After she concentrated all night on raising it, until her mind and soul were exhausted, but she didn't notice any difference. Yet the spire did grow. Now Hazel could see how much she'd accomplished. The thing was 2 stories high, a swirl of rocky tendrils jutting like a spear tip from the oily morass. Inside, something glowed with heat. Hazel couldn't see it clearly, but she knew what was happening. A body was forming out of silver and gold, with oil for blood and raw diamonds for a heart. Raw diamonds for a heart. Hazel was resurrecting the son of Gaia. He was almost ready to wake. Her mother fell to her knees and wept. "I'm sorry, Hazel. I'm so sorry." "What can we do?" Hazel said. "Tell me how to stop it." Her mother shook her head. "She let me go. She knows it's too late. There's nothing we can do." The voice? Hazel was afraid to get her hopes up. But if her mother was really freed, then nothing else mattered. They could get out of here. They could run away, back to New Orleans. "Is she gone?" Her mother glanced fearfully around the cave. "No, she's here. There's only one more thing she needs from me. For that, she needs my free will." Hazel didn't like the sound of that. "Let's get out of here," she urged. "That thing in the rock. It's going to hatch." "Soon," her mother agreed. She looked at Hazel so tenderly. Hazel couldn't remember the last time she'd seen that kind of affection in her mother's eyes. She felt the sob building in her chest. "Pluto warned me," her mother said. "He told me my wish was too dangerous." Your wish?" "All the wealth under the earth," she said. "He controlled it. I wanted it. I was so tired of being poor, Hazel. So tired. First I summoned him, just to see if I could. I never thought the old Gris spell would work on a god. But he courted me, told me I was brave and beautiful." She stared at her bent, calloused hands. "When you were born, he was so pleased and proud. He promised me anything. He swore on the river Styx. I asked for all the riches he had. He warned me the greediest wishes caused the greatest sorrows, but I insisted. I imagined living like a queen, the wife of a god, and you received the curse." Hazel felt as if she were expanding to the breaking point, just like that spire in the pit. Her misery would soon become too great to hold inside, and her skin would shatter. "That's why I can find things under the earth?" "And why they bring only sorrow." Her mother gestured listlessly around the cavern. "These bring sorrow. I have read these books. They have brought me sorrow." Her mother gestured listlessly around the cavern. "That's how she found me, how she was able to control me. I was angry with your father. I blamed him for my problems. I blamed you. I was so bitter. I listened to Gaia's voice. I was a fool. There's got to be something we can do, Hazel said. Tell me how to stop her. The ground trembled. Gaia's disembodied voice echoed through the cave. My eldest rises, she said. The most precious thing in the earth, and you have brought him from the depths, Hazel Levesque. You have made him anew. His awakening cannot be stopped. Only one thing remains. Hazel clenched her fists. She was terrified, but now that her mother was free, she felt like she could confront her enemy at last. This creature, this evil goddess, had ruined their lives. Hazel wasn't going to let her win. I won't help you anymore, she yelled. But I am done with your help, girl. I brought you here for one reason only. Your mother required incentive. Hazel's throat constricted. Mother? I'm sorry, Hazel. If you can forgive me, please, know that it was only because I loved you. She promised to let you live if you sacrifice yourself, Hazel said, realizing the truth. She needs you to give your life willingly to raise that thing. Alcyoneus, Gaia said, eldest of the giants. He must rise first, and this will be his new homeland, far from the gods. He will walk these icy mountains and forests. He will raise an army of monsters. While the gods are divided, fighting each other in this mortal world war, he will send forth his armies to destroy Olympus. Just a reminder, this was during World War II. The Earth Goddess's dreams were so powerful they cast shadows across the cave walls, ghastly shifting images of Nazi armies raging across Europe, Japanese planes destroying American cities. Hazel finally understood. The gods of Olympus would take sides in the battle as they always did in human wars. While the gods fought each other to a bloody standstill, an army of monsters would rise in the north. Alcyoneus would revive his brother giants and send them forth to conquer the world. The weakened gods would fall. The mortal conflict would rage for decades until all civilization was swept away and the Earth Goddess awakened fully. Gaia would rule forever. The goddess purred, because your mother was greedy and cursed you with the gift of finding riches. In my sleeping state, I would have needed decades more, perhaps even centuries, before I found the power to resurrect Alcyoneus myself. But now he will wake, and soon, so shall I. With terrible certainty, Hazel knew what would happen next. The only thing Gaia needed was a willing sacrifice, a soul to be consumed for Alcyoneus to awaken. Her mother would step into the fissure and touch that horrible spire, and she would be absorbed. Hazel, go! Her mother rose unsteadily. She'll let you live, but you must hurry. Hazel believed it. That was the most horrible thing. Gaia would honor the bargain and let Hazel live. Hazel would survive to see the end of the world, knowing that she'd caused it. No, Hazel made her decision. I won't live. Not for that. She reached deep into her soul. She called on her father, the lord of the underworld, and summoned all the riches that lay in his vast realm. The cavern shook. Cursed diamonds! Oop, I keep dropping my diamonds. Around the spire of Alcyoneus, oil bubbled, then churned, and erupted like a boiling cauldron. Don't be foolish, Gaia said, but Hazel detected concern in her tone, maybe even fear. You will destroy yourself for nothing. Your mother will still die. Hazel almost wavered. She remembered her father's promise. Someday her curse would be washed away. A descendant of Neptune would bring her peace. Descendant of Neptune! He'd even said she might find a horse of her own. Maybe that strange stallion in the hills was meant for her. But none of that would happen if she died now. She'd never see Sammy again, or return to New Orleans. Her life would be 13 short, bitter years with an unhappy ending. She met her mother's eyes. For once, her mother didn't look sad or angry. Her eyes shone with pride. You were my gift, Hazel, she said, my most precious gift. I was foolish to think I needed anything else. She kissed Hazel's forehead and held her close. Her warmth gave Hazel the courage to continue. They would die, but not as sacrifices to Gaia. Instinctively, Hazel knew that their final act would reject Gaia's power. Their souls would go to the underworld, and Alcyoneus would not rise. At least not yet. Hazel summoned the last of her willpower. The air turned searing hot. The spire began to sink. Jewels and chunks of gold shot from the fissure with such force they cracked the cavern walls and sent shrapnel flying, stinging Hazel's skin through her jacket. "Stop this!" Gaia demanded. "You cannot prevent his rise. At best, you will delay him a few decades, half a century. Would you trade your lives for that?" Hazel gave her an answer. The fissure exploded. The roof crumbled. Hazel sank into her mother's arms, into the darkness, as oil filled her lungs and the island collapsed into the bay. So, end of the flashback. The trio stopped in Mendocino, I think that's how you say it, 150 miles north of the Golden Gate Bridge. Hazel is about to admit she's from the 1940s, but Frank already figured it out and he doesn't care. I mean, come on, Nico was also from around that time period. And you know what? So was Captain America and the Winter Soldier. So, all the cool people were from that era and were displaced into our century. Hazel is suddenly kidnapped by grass. Yeah, I read that part and I'm just like, what? And the only thing that came to mind was stray sod, which is like part of like, I guess it's Celtic or something. It's like an old myth, something that has to do with like elves or fairies and stuff like that. So the stray sod are magical creatures that look like grass, and when you walk amongst them, they will get you like completely turned around and get you lost. Hazel manages to get onto a boulder where the grass can't reach her. I mean, it can't grow on rocks, so, she's safe. The grass are carpoi, spirits of the grain, children of Gaia. The boys finally catch up to them, and the trio defeat the carpoi. The word carpoi just makes me think of fish. After the fight, they catch a glimpse of the monster army headed for Camp Jupiter. Polybites, the giant leading the army, was made to fight Neptune/Poseidon. The trio meet Iris, the rainbow goddess, and Fleecy, a nebulae cloud nymph. Iris wants to talk to Frank alone. She said Frank was born with too many gifts. She doesn't say straight out what the gifts are, but she says Frank can be anything. And it's not one of those motivational things that positive adults in your life will tell you. She literally means Frank can be anything. She tells Frank that in order to find Thanatos, he needs to seek out the seer Phineas. And we're not talking Phineas and Ferb.
Herb, I know what we're gonna do today.
He's blind, but he can see the past, present, and future. He knows many things. He can tell you where Thanatos is being held. In the old days, he committed horrible crimes. He used his gift of sight for evil. Jupiter sent the Harpies to plague him. The Argonauts, including your ancestor, by the way, the Prince of Pylos. His gift, his story, that you must discover on your own. Suffice it to say, the Argonauts drove away the Harpies in exchange for Phineas's help. That was eons ago, but I understand Phineas has returned to the mortal world. You'll find him in Portland, Oregon, which is on your way north. But you must promise me one thing. If he's still plagued by Harpies, do not kill them, no matter what Phineas promises you. Win his help some other way. The Harpies are not evil. The last thing that Iris tells him is that if he gives his piece of wood to someone close to his heart, he'd be less likely to die. So just think about that for a second. So cute. Iris sent Frank to fight basilisks on his own. Frank uses the spear that Mars had given him. So remember that the tip was a dragon's tooth, and power of the dragon's tooth being planted in soil was mentioned back in the Titan's Curse. It ends up bringing an army of the dead. Well, in the Titan's Curse, it was a small army of the dead. Here, it's just one skeleton warrior to defend Frank. So it's the skeleton that's fighting the basilisk. Percy and Hazel catch up after the skeleton warrior disappears, and Frank tells them that they need to go find Phineas.
Herb, I know what we're gonna do today.
It is now June 21st. They have 3 days to return to Camp Jupiter. The trio continues sailing north. Percy got a whale to help them go faster while he took a nap. And just for a split second, I was imagining Dory from Finding Nemo speaking whale. And of course, dreams are very prominent when it comes to this series. His dreams were as disjointed and scary as ever. He imagined himself on Mount Tamalpais, north of San Francisco, fighting at the old Titan stronghold. That didn't make sense. He hadn't been with the Romans when they had attacked, but he saw it all clearly. A Titan in armor, Annabeth and 2 other girls fighting at Percy's side. One of the girls died in the battle. Percy knelt over her, watching as she dissolved into stars. So if you can remember, that actually happened in the Titan's Curse. Then he saw the giant warship in its dry dock. The bronze dragon figurehead glinted in the morning light. The riggings and armaments were complete, but something was wrong. A hatch in the deck was open, and smoke poured from some kind of engine. A boy with curly black hair was cursing as he pounded the engine with a wrench. 2 other demigods squatted next to him, watching with concern. One was a teenage guy with short blonde hair. The other was a girl with long dark hair. "You realize it's the solstice," the girl said. "We're supposed to leave today." "I know that." The curly-haired mechanic whacked the engine a few more times. "Could be the fizz rockets. Could be the Samoflange. Could be Gaia messing with us again. I'm not sure." "How long?" the blonde guy asked. 2, 3 days? "They may not have that long," the girl warned. Something told Percy that she meant Camp Jupiter. Then the scene shifted again. He saw a boy and his dog roaming over the yellow hills of California. But as the image became clearer, Percy realized it wasn't a boy. It was a cyclops in ragged jeans and a flannel shirt. The dog was a shambling mountain of black fur, easily as big as a rhino. The cyclops carried a massive club over his shoulder, but Percy didn't feel that he was an enemy. He kept yelling Percy's name, calling him brother. "He smells farther away," the cyclops moaned to the dog. "Why does he smell farther?" "Roof!" the dog barked, and Percy's dream changed again. He saw a range of snowy mountains, so tall they broke the clouds. Gaia's sleeping face appeared in the shadows of the rock. "Such a valuable pawn," she said soothingly. "Do not fear, Percy Jackson. Come north. Your friends will die, yes, but I will preserve you for now. I have great plans for you." In a valley between the mountains lay a massive field of ice. The edge plunged into the sea, hundreds of feet below, with sheets of frost constantly crumbling into the water. On top of the ice field stood a legion camp. Ramparts, moats, towers, barracks, just like Camp Jupiter, except 3 times as large. At the crossroads outside the Principia, a figure in dark robes stood shackled to the ice. Percy's vision swept past him into the headquarters. There, in the gloom, sat a giant even bigger than Polybites. His skin glinted gold. Displayed behind him were the tattered frozen banners of a Roman legion, including a large golden eagle with its wings spread. "We await you," the giant's voice boomed. "While you fumble your way north, trying to find me, my armies will destroy your precious camps. First the Romans, then the others. You cannot win, little demigod." Percy then woke in Portland, Oregon, in time to search for Phineas.
Herb, I know what we're gonna do today.
They found Phineas fighting off harpies, trying to get his food. Phineas said, "When I first got the gift of prophecy eons ago, it's true Jupiter cursed me. He sent the harpies to steal my food. You see, I had a bit of a big mouth. I gave away too many secrets that the gods wanted kept. I had to make a deal with the Argonauts. They wanted information too, you see. I told them to kill the harpies and I'd cooperate. Well, they drove those nasty creatures away, but Iris wouldn't let them kill the harpies. An outrage. So this time, when my patron brought me back to life—" "Your patron?" Frank asked. Phineas gave him a wicked grin. "Why, Gaia, of course. Who do you think opened the doors of death? Your girlfriend here understands. If you want to be noble and stick with the losing side, that's your business. But Gaia is waking. She's already rewritten the rules of life and death. I'm alive again, and in exchange for my help, a prophecy here, a prophecy there. I get my fondest wish. The tables have been turned, so to speak. Now I can eat all I want, all day long, and the harpies have to watch and starve. In time, Gaia will see that the gods are properly punished. Horrible job they've done ruling the world. You want to find Thanatos? He's being kept at Alcyonius's lair. I can tell you where that is. Of course I can, but you'll have to do me a favor. So Phineas wants them to capture one specific harpy in order to torture her. And honestly, no. Okay, we do not torture creatures. We do not torture people. We do not torture anyone or anything. It is wrong. It is cruel. Like, reading about him made me so mad. I was just like, can we get Nico to come over and drop this creep into the underworld? Like, no, he does not deserve to come back from the underworld. Gaia should have left him there. The trio followed this specific harpy. The trio followed the harpy Phineas wanted all the way to her nest. Her name is Ella, Aella as an alternate spelling, harpy in English and Latin. Ella tends to babble, so sometimes she doesn't make entire sense, but I found her adorable, really. Friends, 10 seasons, 1994 to 2004. A half-blood of the eldest gods shall reach 16 against all odds. 16. Here's 16. Page 16, Mastering the Art of French Cooking. Ingredients, bacon, butter. Yeah, if you kind of notice that she was reciting a bit of the big prophecy from the first 5 Percy Jackson books. And of course, Percy recognized the lines, but he doesn't know how or why. Again, he doesn't have all of his memories still. Ella's nest is made out of books. Books. Almost everything she says ends up being quotes from books that she's read. And she memorized everything. I mean, I have a pretty good memory when it comes to books and what I've read, but Ella is like on a whole nother level, and I am honestly jealous. The trio won't give Ella to Phineas. Good, because he is a jerk. They will get help another way. Does Phineas have any weaknesses? Blind. He's blind. Chance. Game of chance. 2 to 1. Bad odds. Collarfold. Phineas sees big things, prophecies, fates, God stuff, not small stuff, random, exciting, and he is blind. I think I get it, Percy said. Phineas sees the future. He knows tons of important events, but he can't see small things like random occurrences, spontaneous games of chance. That makes gambling exciting for him. If we can tempt him into making a bet... Hazel nodded slowly. I mean, if he loses, he has to tell us where Thanatos is. But what do we have to wager? What kind of game do we play? Something simple with the high stakes, Percy said. Like 2 choices. One you live, one you die. And the prize has to be something Phineas wants. I mean, besides Ella. That's off the table. Sight, Ella muttered. Sight is good for blind men. Healing. Nope. Gaia won't do that for Phineas. Gaia keeps Phineas blind, dependent on Gaia. Yep. Frank and Percy exchanged a meaningful look. Gorgon's blood, they said simultaneously. Phineas wrote down Thanatos' location before agreeing to Percy's gambling game. And I'm going to say this right now, do not gamble. It is wrong. It's bad. You could lose everything. Both Percy and Phineas are to drink the vials of Gorgon blood at the same time. It's a game of chance. One would die from poison.
I challenge you to a battle of wits.
To the death? I accept.
Where is the poison? The battle of wits has begun. It ends when you decide and we both drink, and find out who is right and who is dead.
Phineas drank the poison.
When death is on the line!
It turns out that Thanatos can be found at Hubbard Glacier. The trio sailed out of Portland with Ella. Hazel confesses about her past, telling them everything. Hazel then has another flashback. It's about her time in the underworld. Interesting. She was in the fields of Asphodel until Nico helped her escape the underworld. The fields of Asphodel is like purgatory. You're not in heaven, which is Elysium for Greek mythology, or hell, which is the fields of punishment. But Asphodel is like right in the middle. It's just an endless field of memory, which honestly, I kind of feel like Earth itself might be Asphodel because, wow. Frank told Hazel about his life being tied to a piece of firewood and gave it to her for safekeeping. Aww, so cute. It is now June 22nd. Hazel wakes up in Seattle, Washington. The rowboat wasn't meant to travel so far so fast, and it broke and sank right as they reached land. Percy said they needed to find Hyla. Ella says Seattle is Amazon territory. Amazons were warrior women, no men allowed. The first Amazon was a daughter of Ares and a nymph named Harmonia. They are completely different than the hunters of Artemis. So, the best I can describe it is Wonder Woman and where she came from. You know, just the island full of women, all warriors, all super cool fighters, like that. Ella doesn't like the Amazons. She went to go look for more books to read. Like, girl, same. Let's be besties. I will let you borrow my books and you can show me where to find more books. Amazons own the Amazon company, according to these books, but it's not factual, okay? The Amazons do not actually own the Amazon company. It was just a little joke. The Amazons have a horse in a cage, and it turns out it is the exact same horse that Hazel had seen in Alaska like almost 100 years ago. The horse's name is, I want to say Orion. I'm not really sure. Arion. Kind of like Orion, but with an A. So I'm just going to go with Orion or Arion. I'll go with Arion. Hyla is queen of the Amazons. You! Hyla glared at Percy Jackson with murderous rage. Percy muttered something in ancient Greek. Clipboard, he said. Spa. Pirates. Hyla nodded. She drew a dagger from her belt. You were incredibly foolish to come here, she said. You destroyed my home. You made my sister and me exiles and prisoners. Circe's Island, Percy said. I just remembered. The Gorgon's blood. Maybe it's starting to heal my mind. The Sea of Monsters. Hyla. She welcomed us at the docks, took us to see her boss. Hyla worked for the sorceress. Hyla bared her perfect white teeth. Are you telling me you've had amnesia? You know, I might actually believe you. Why else would you be stupid enough to come here? We've come in peace, Hazel insisted. What did Percy do? Peace? The queen raised her eyebrows at Hazel. What did he do? This male destroyed Circe's school of magic. Circe turned me into a guinea pig, Percy protested. No excuses, Hyla said. Circe was a wise and generous employer. I had room and board, a good health plan, dental, pet leopards, free potions, everything. And this demigod with his friend, the blonde, Annabeth. Percy tapped his forehead like he wanted the memories to come back faster. That's right. I was there with Annabeth. You released our captives, Blackbeard and his pirates. She turned to Hazel. Have you ever been kidnapped by pirates? It isn't fun. They burned our spa to the ground. My sister and I were their prisoners for months. Fortunately, we were daughters of Bellona. We learned to fight quickly. If we hadn't, she shuddered. Well, the pirates learned to respect us. Eventually, we made our way to California where She hesitated as if the memory was painful. Where my sister and I parted ways. She stepped toward Percy until they were nose to nose. She ran her dagger under his chin. Of course, I survived and prospered. I have risen to be queen of the Amazons, so perhaps I should thank you. You're welcome, Percy said. Seriously, it's a miracle this kid does not get smacked in the head more often. Smart mouth. Hazel explains Raina sent them and why. Hyla wants to talk to Hazel alone and has the boys locked up. Sorry, boys. Hyla explains about the Amazons. Amazons have always had a rocky relationship with other demigods, especially male demigods. We fought for King Priam in the Trojan War, but Achilles killed our queen, Penthesilea. Years before that, Hercules stole Queen I can say this. Huh. Years before that, Hercules stole Queen Hippolyta's belt. This belt I'm wearing. It took us centuries to recover it. Long before that, at the very beginning of the Amazon nation, a hero named Bellerophon killed our first queen, Otrera. Otrera, our first queen, daughter of Ares. Otrera lived long before Rome in a time when all demigods were Greek. Unfortunately, some of our warriors still prefer the old ways. The Amazons are a mix, Greek and Roman. Gaia brought her back from the dead to throw the Amazons into a civil war. It is working. Otrera is a legend among our people. She plans to take back the throne and lead us to war against the Romans. Many will follow her. Otrera has challenged me to a duel. Every Amazon has that right. Tonight at midnight, we'll battle for the throne. When I am killed in combat, and it's only a matter of time, Otrera will be queen. She will march to Camp Jupiter with our forces, but she will not go to help. She'll go to join the giants' army. So we've got a bit of a problem here with the Amazons. Those darn civil wars. Hyla then talks about the horse, Orion. Orion is a son of Neptune and Ceres. So, in Greek name, it's Poseidon and Demeter, which also means that the horse is Percy's brother. Orion is the fastest horse alive. He eats gold, and only the most courageous female warrior is allowed to ride him. All of the Amazons have failed. Again, the Amazons, warrior women, have failed in trying to ride Orion. The horse eats gold, therefore he's going with Hazel. Why? Because Hazel can raise gold from the earth. Hazel is being taken to where the boys are locked up. She uses her power over metal and jewels to attack the guards and free the boys. Diamonds to the rescue! Yay! See? These things are lucky, not unlucky. Cute little diamond. They attach a chariot to Orion and escape the Amazons. That's when Ella catches up to them before they leave Seattle. We can't leave the cool harpy behind. We're besties now. Ella's my new bestie. According to Ella, Arion was running 750 miles per hour. 800. 803. Fast. Very fast. Reached North Vancouver in Canada, only stopping because their chariot was falling apart from the speed Arion was running. Can you really imagine a horse going that fast and the carriage you're in, or the chariot you're in, just like completely falls apart underneath your feet? So once they lost their ride, Arion took off running. As it turns out, they actually stopped right outside Frank's family's home. On their way to Frank's house, they ended up coming across a camp of Laestrygonians. If you don't remember, the Laestrygonians were first mentioned in the Sea of Monsters. Once again, Frank uses his magical spear to summon the skeleton warrior, again just one, and the skeleton only killed enough of the Laestrygonians to let the trio and Ella sneak into the house. The house looks like it's been abandoned. Okay, where's Granny? Granny is in bed, dying, because she's old, and Mars is looking after her, because Mars really isn't that bad of a guy. Mars wants to talk to Frank alone. It's about his family gift. Heraclimenes, Frank said. He was my ancestor, a Greek prince, an Argonaut. He died fighting Hercules. He had an ability that helped him in combat, some sort of gift from the gods. He fought like a swarm of bees. Somehow the family got to China. In the days of the Roman Empire, one of Heraclimenes' descendants served in a legion, Seneca Gracchus, but he also had a Chinese name, Sung Gao. The Battle of Carrhae, huge disaster for the Romans. They fought these guys called the Parthians on the eastern border of the empire. 15,000 Romans died. 10,000 more were taken prisoner. And one of the prisoners was my ancestor, Seneca Gracchus. The Parthians put the captured legionnaires to work since they were pretty good fighters, except then Parthia got invaded again from the other direction, by the Chinese, and the Roman prisoners got captured again. That's how a Roman legion got to China. The Romans eventually put down roots and built a new home called Legion. Seneca Gracchus had the family's gift. He fought dragons. He was the most powerful dragon of all. He settled in China, passed the family gift to his kids, and so on. Eventually, the family emigrated to North America and got involved with Camp Jupiter. Seneca Gracchus, the greatest dragon of them all. And again, Iris said that Frank can be anything. Just let that sink in a little bit. It is now June 23rd. Frank wakes up in his grandmother's room. Mars is gone, and Grandma is awake. Grandma expands more on the ancestor Periclymenus. So Periclymenus was a grandson of Poseidon and part of the Argonauts. Poseidon had given him the ability to shapeshift into various animals. That means Percy is Frank's uncle. Distantly, but still. Also, the ability to change into animals, like, how cool would that be? After leaving Grandma so that he could go fight the Laestrygonians, Frank stops to talk to Ella. He says they're going to Alaska and asks if she'll go with them. And Ella's babble speak, because I love the way she speaks. She's adorable. I love her. Alaska, 626,425 square miles. State mammal, the moose. To the north, beyond the gods, lies the Legion's crown. Falling from ice, the son of Neptune shall drown. Burned. The rest is burned. So it's not really hard to figure out that she's actually quoting a bit of a prophecy that she had read. Side note, what do you mean that the son of Poseidon is going to drown? He's a son of Poseidon, the sea god. Water is his thing. You can't drown. Ella remembers everything she reads. She said something about the page being burned, like she'd read a damaged text of prophecies. The lost Sibylline books that outlined the entire destiny of Rome. If Ella actually read a copy somehow and memorized it, then she's the most valuable harpy in the world. So unfortunately, we do not get more about that in these books. It is expanded upon later during the Trials of Apollo series. The trio and Ella fight off the Laestrygonians as they escaped in Grandma's car. And I just had like horrible flashbacks of the scene in the TV show where Percy was driving and he kept crashing the car into the wall like every 2 seconds. And I just sat there like cringing every single time. Like there is nothing more horrifying than a 12-year-old trying to drive a car. So they make it to an airfield where a plane is waiting for them because Grandma's got connections. Heck yeah, Grandma. And Ella, despite being a harpy that can fly, is afraid of planes. But girl, same. Like, do not put me on a plane. You put me on a plane, I am in quiet hysterics because I don't want to be that one person like screaming my head off and freaking out everybody else. I am like internally screaming, gripping the armrests and hoping that the plane does not crash because I've seen Final Destination one too many times. Percy suggests that Ella remains in hiding until a friend of his can come get her and take her to Camp Jupiter. Ella says, Camp, Wisdom's daughter walks alone. The mark of Athena burns through Rome. Wisdom's daughter, mark of Athena. What important character can you think of that is Athena's daughter? We've got a minor prophecy about Annabeth, which is important for the next book. Ella then goes to hide until Percy's friend shows up to collect her. The pilot at the airfield, it turns out, used to go to Camp Jupiter. The pilot flies the trio to Alaska. Percy admits that his memories have been coming back. There's a Greeks versus Romans recap, and Again, all of that was mentioned in The Lost Hero, including Jason and Percy switching places. Percy falls asleep and manages to connect to Tyson, his Cyclops brother. Percy tells him to find Ella and take her to California. Percy will meet them there later. The dream shifts to the monster army outside Camp Jupiter. Monsters are waiting for the Feast of Fortuna before attacking. Honestly, that part just made me think of like Harry Potter a little bit, the way that Voldemort would always wait until the end of the school year to do his big plans. I mean, come on, at least he respected education. Percy then wakes up in Anchorage, Alaska. Honestly, this was like a big miss that they could have been in Juneau, Alaska. Come on, Juneau, Alaska, Juno the goddess. That would have been great. Juneau, spelled Juneau, was named after Joe Juno, unfortunately, not the goddess, one of the first prospectors to discover gold at Gold Creek. So that's a little bit of a fun fact for you, but I still think it would have been hilarious if they were in Juneau, Alaska, despite the fact that it has nothing to do with the goddess Juno. The trio is headed towards Hubbard Glacier when they're attacked by griffins. And not that cool, cute griffin from the Kane Chronicles either. They fight the griffins and continue on to their quest. It is now June 24th. The Feast of Fortuna will begin at sundown. Percy takes a step into a meadow, and he sank into the ground. Hazel dove into the muskeg after Percy. Okay, vocab lesson time. Muskeg, boggy soil. Marshy silt and decomposed plants made a surface that looked completely solid, but it was even worse than quicksand. Gaia speaks to Hazel. She captured Nico. Not my Nico! Percy grabs onto Hazel and Frank pulls them out of the earth. Hazel tells the boys what Gaia told her. Percy says they'll figure out what happened to Nico. The trio takes a break to rest. More griffins appear, because why not? Hazel called for a Ryan. The horse arrived and took them to Hubbard Glacier before the griffins could attack. Remember, fast horse, super fast. We found a frozen Roman camp and Thanatos bound in chains. Thanatos is being guarded by spirits of dead Romans. Bit ironic if you think about it, considering he's the god of the dead. They don't want Thanatos free so they can come back to life, the same as Hazel. Thanatos said only the fire of life can melt the chains of death. Why are the gods always so cryptic? Alcyoneus appeared before the trio could free Thanatos. Dun dun dun! The Titans didn't think big enough. They planned to destroy the gods in their new home of America. We giants know better. To kill a weed, you must pull up its roots. Even now, while my forces destroy your little Roman camp, my brother Porphyrion is preparing for the real battle in the ancient lands. We will destroy the gods at their source. Well, that's not good. Frank asks Hazel for his piece of firewood back. Percy is fighting the ghosts, while Hazel faces Alcyoneus, and Frank frees Thanatos. Frank is using his firewood to melt the chains. And Percy saw the lost Roman eagle and is going after it. Percy saw the Roman eagle and is going after it. Frank nearly uses his entire piece of firewood just trying to free Thanatos. I mean, good for you, man, but come on, boy. Think about your own life for a minute. Also, the complete irony if he had died. Hazel is in trouble, and Frank hurries to her side, finally accessing his family's gift. Frank can shapeshift into animals. Percy made a part of the glacier crumble. Ghosts are falling to their second deaths, and Percy went with them. Thanatos said, "The doors of death, closing them would be good, but I fear it is beyond my power. How you would do it, I haven't the faintest idea. I can't tell you exactly where they are. The location isn't, well, it's not entirely a physical place. They must be located through questioning. I can tell you to start your search in Rome, the original Rome. You will need a special guide. Only one sort of demigod can read the signs that will ultimately lead you to the doors of death." Frank, Hazel, and Orion dragged Alcyonius across Alaska and into Canada. Alcyonius can't be killed in Alaska. He's only weak in Canada, which is kind of funny. I mean, Canada, the greatest weakness. Actually, I'd like to go to Canada one day. Seems like a nice place. Frank and Hazel defeated him and rode back to the glacier to search for Percy. Percy was fine, because of course he was. He fell into a bunch of water. We're good. He has the Romans' lost eagle. Orion takes the trio back to Camp Jupiter, and considering that he's a super fast horse, they got there in like the blink of an eye, possibly maybe 10 seconds total, something like that. Anyways, if they had used him from the very beginning, they wouldn't have gone on such a very long quest. But a plot's got a plot. On their way back to California, Percy ends up getting all of his memories back. Camp Jupiter is under attack. He'd almost forgotten that Nico D'Angelo was missing. Hazel had told him what Thanatos had said about searching for the doors of death in Rome, and Percy was anxious to find Nico for his own reasons. To wring the kid's neck for having pretended he didn't know Percy when he first came to camp. "Percy, I love you. Do not hurt my Nico." Percy whistles for Mrs. O'Leary, his hellhound, and she arrives along with Tyson and Ella. Percy asks all three to help the Romans fight the monsters that are attacking Camp Jupiter. Queen Hyla and the Amazons arrive to help fight the monsters as well. Percy then faces Polybites. With help from Terminus, the Roman god of borders, Percy defeats Polybites. Actually, that scene was kind of funny, so read it. It made me laugh, okay? But then again, a lot of Rick Riordan's books make me laugh. Camp Jupiter is now safe, and everyone is celebrating the Feast of Fortuna, and Percy was made Praetor of Camp Jupiter, because of course he was. It's Percy Jackson. That's a big ha-ha to Octavian, okay? You did not get the job, you little weasel. Percy is then dreaming of Juno. If we are to defeat Gaia, our plans must be timed perfectly. First, I needed Jason and his friends to free me from my prison. You weren't needed at Camp Jupiter until now to save the Romans at their moment of greatest crisis. The 8 months between, well, I do have other plans brewing, my boy. Opposing Gaia, working behind Jupiter's back, protecting your friends, it's a full-time job. If I had to guard you from Gaia's monsters and schemes as well, and keep you hidden from your friends back east all that time, no, much better you take a safe nap. You would have been a distraction, a loose cannon. Your timing here was perfect. They trust you now. You are a hero of Rome, and while you slept, Jason Grace has learned to trust the Greeks. They've had time to build the Argo too. Together, you and Jason will unite the camps. I know you, Percy Jackson. In many ways, you are impulsive, but when it comes to your friends, you are as constant as a compass needle. You are unswervingly loyal, and you inspire loyalty. You are the glue that will unite the seven. The heroes of Olympus must unite. After your victory over Kronos in Manhattan, I fear that wounded Jupiter's self-esteem. My proud and obstinate husband refuses to ask mere demigods for help again. He believes the giants can be fought without you, and Gaia can be forced back to her slumbers. I know better, but you must prove yourself. Only by sailing to the ancient lands and closing the doors of death will you convince Jupiter that you are worthy of fighting side by side with the gods. It will be the greatest quest since Aeneas sailed from Troy. Percy tells Frank and Hazel about his dream. The trio got a video message from Leo Valdez at Camp Half-Blood. Hazel says Leo looks exactly like her ex-boyfriend, Sammy Valdez. And honestly, that's an important detail for later. We will come back to that, I promise. Leo says he and his friends will be arriving at Camp Jupiter soon. And we have another Senate meeting. Yay. You've always thought of the Greeks as your enemies, and there's a good reason for that. I think the gods have kept our two camps apart because whenever we meet, we fight. But that can change. It has to change if we're to defeat Gaia. That's what the prophecy of 7 means. 7 demigods, Greek and Roman, will have to close the doors of death together. You claim this is a combined quest, Reyna said. You claim Juno intends for us to work with this other group, Camp Half-Blood. Yet the Greeks have been our enemies for eons. They are known for their deceptions. Maybe so, Percy said, but enemies can become friends. A week ago, would you have thought Romans and Amazons would be fighting side by side? The demigods of Camp Half-Blood have already been working with Camp Jupiter, Percy said. We just didn't realize it. During the Titan War last summer, while you were attacking Mount Othrys, we were defending Mount Olympus in Manhattan. I fought Kronos myself. I know it's hard to believe, but I think I've earned your trust. I'm on your side. Hazel and Frank, I'm sure they're meant to go with me on this quest. The other four are on their way from Camp Half-Blood right now. One of them is Jason Grace, your old praetor. Hear them out. Jason will back up everything I'm telling you. I swear it on my life. In the middle of this meeting, a flying ship came from the sky carrying the Greek campers from Camp Half-Blood. And that's where this book ends. So because this book started off with Percy, I gave it a 3.5 because yay, Percy! And then it dropped down to a 3 because of all of the Romans rules and regulations and OMG. And then it bumped up to a 4 once the quest started because that is so much fun than reading about rules. Seriously, I felt constricted and I'm not even part of the story. Okay, I don't like being controlled at all, ever. Despite this book being 513 pages, a lot of it was just a recap of what happened in Percy Jackson and the Olympians, as well as The Lost Hero. Knowing that the Mark of Athena comes next makes me very jittery because of what happens at the end, and I am so not looking forward to that. Like, my anxiety shoots up the very second I think about it. Like, okay, but we will get to that later when I film it. So, yes, okay. So that's all I have to say on the Son of Neptune. I'll see you next time. Bye!
We should totally just stab Caesar!